If you're new to wildlife photography, this world will prove to be super exciting. But it's not just about pointing the camera at an animal and taking a photo of it. If you're aiming to take great photos, then you'll need to practice. And to help you improve faster, I've come up with 10 common mistakes that I've seen beginners make to help you learn from them. The first mistake that I see beginners make is to shoot from where they stand. Now I get that when you encounter an animal, your first instinct is to just raise your camera and start clicking right away. But 99 out of 100 times, this is not going to be your best angle. I understand that this is exciting and you want to get your shot quickly, but you have to learn to take your time. You have to learn to slow down, to frame, and to compose. And this develops your eye for photography. Don't just aim to document the animal. You want to aim to create artistic shots. The second mistake that I see beginners make is to shoot at the longest focal length. What is the difference between shooting an animal in the wild versus one at the zoo? Beginners tend to think that the more reach I have, the better. The more zoomed in an image is, the nicer it's going to look. While this may be true to some extent, for instance, if you're taking portraits of animals, most of the time you actually want to be able to show the animal in its environment. Showcasing the environment is a great way to place the wild animal in its wild habitat. And not all the times you have to use a long telephoto zoom. You can also explore the use of using wide-angle lenses to create a more distinct look for your photography as well. The third mistake that I see people make is to disregard the background. Now I know that it's extremely difficult to find the animal, and when you do, you raise your camera and all your attention in the viewfinder is on that particular animal. But a picture is made up of more than just the subject. It includes all the other elements in the frame, including the background. So, you'll need to pay attention to the background as well. Are there any distracting elements in it? If your background isn't ideal, what can you do? Perhaps you could take a few steps to your left or to the right, or maybe just wait for the animal to come to a better location. The fourth mistake I see is people posting photos of an animal that is looking away. Now you want to treat photographing an animal just exactly like photographing a human. Most of the time, you don't want to photograph the back view or of the subject looking away. A front view or side view is usually a lot more ideal. The fifth mistake I see, which is a personal pet peeve of mine, is overly processed editing. Now, have you ever seen a great photo of an animal only for it to be ruined by a tasteless edit? This is not called out enough often, but I have to be the bad guy here. First, sky replacement in Photoshop. I definitely do not recommend it. If the lighting in the sky does not match the subject, or like the bird that's being photographed, then the whole image will just look awful. Just don't do sky replacement. With the new AI features in editing softwares that can detect backgrounds, something that I notice a lot of people do is to just mask the background and bring the exposure down to 0, or basically darken the background completely. I get that they're trying to go for a studio look against a dark or black background, but it just does not look like it. The saturation slider seems to be very popular among beginners, and pushing it up and up seems to make the colors pop. But there has got to be a threshold for the amount of saturation that you can push. And to know if you're overdoing it, you can just compare your colors in the photograph against those on the internet, for instance, and see if yours is way too over-processed. That's how you know that you're pushing the saturation slider way too much. Lastly, isolated colors are out of trend. They don't do much for the image and they really make the image look weird, so just don't do it as well. The next mistake I see is people not focusing on the eyes of the animal. With new and modern cameras, eye detection autofocus is fast and reliable, but sometimes in difficult situations or with older cameras, you have to manually choose the focus point. Some beginners tend to put their focus point on the largest part of the animal, which tends to be the body instead of the eyes. Now, when people look at an image, they are drawn to the eyes of the subject first, and that's the part that is crucial to focus. So you'll need to remember to put the focus point on the eyes of the animal. The seventh mistake that I see is cutting off a portion of the subject in the photograph. If you're looking to fill the frame with your subject, then don't cut off a portion of that subject. From missing tails to missing feet, it will always make the audience wonder why the particular photograph was framed in that particular way. If it helps, shoot at a wider focal length, and then you have the ability to crop in later. The next mistake I see is people only relying on their sense of sight when they're out and about. When you're out looking for animals, many beginners tend to only rely on their sense of sight. While it is a powerful sense, it may not be ideal in all scenarios. Being able to use your sense of hearing can actually increase your chances of seeing more animals. Listening out for bird calls or footsteps and being able to identify which animal made that sound is extremely crucial. The only way to practice is to be as quiet as possible. You'll want to walk with minimal noise and stay away from crowded reserves. And the way I personally like to do it is to just stay at one particular spot and just wait it out over there. The ninth mistake that I see beginners make is to use their cameras in fully automatic mode. Now, for those that are not so technically inclined, I get that learning the ins and outs of your camera can be an extremely daunting task. There are so many terms and settings to learn, like aperture, ISO, and shutter speeds. Then you resort to using automatic mode and wonder why when you take home your pictures at the end of the day, they don't look as good or a lot of them come out blurry. Learning how to operate your camera well is essential, and being in full control of your settings will help you achieve your desired image. It may be slow going at first, but with practice, you can definitely get good and excel at this. The last mistake that I see beginners make is to focus on quantity and not quality. I know of many wildlife photographers who treat their journey like a game of Pokemon, ticking off as many species as possible on their bucket list. They move on from species to species so fast that for them, it becomes a game of trying to see as many species as possible rather than to create beautiful images. Visiting as many places as possible and focusing on quantity isn't as ideal for me as focusing on your favorite places and trying to get the best shots. The best photos aren't the ones that come from encountering a particular animal once or twice, but from going time and time again to that same place, understanding the animal's routine, behavior, and placing yourself in the best possible location to get that perfect shot. If you understand these and you keep working on them, then I guarantee that you will see a huge improvement in your wildlife photography.